Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
How's your mama, ma'am?
If you've got a tip for Melissa, an unsolved murder, a weird story you'd like to have investigated, what the world needs now other than love, sweet love, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. She doesn't count sheep. She sets them free so she can stay awake all night obsessing over true crime Facebook pages. Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Leave it to the beautiful and talented producer Mark to quote Burt Bacharach. What the world needs now.
I was actually quoting Hal David.
Oh, fuck. I forget who does what, but...
Yeah. Well, Hal doesn't do anything anymore. He's dead, so...
I say no one knows what Hal David ever did. Burt Bacharach was the front man.
He did. He wrote all that interesting music in weird time signatures and stuff, but I actually sat behind Hal David once at an ASCAP meeting. At an ASCAP, I guess it was like a board meeting or something that they invited all the members to, and I shook his hand.
Wow. Can I touch you?
Darling, I think you already have.
Touched him? Oh, right. I meant now, though, that I know you've had the brush with greatness. Who the fuck is Hal David and who cares? Anyway, that's awesome.
Yeah. I can tell you're impressed.
No.
Yeah.
No. I probably wouldn't have been impressed if you touched Burt Bacharach either, Grandpa. I don't care.
Okay.
I haven't thought about...
That you've got a great amount of respect for the great artists of our time.
I do, yeah. No. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, no. You know who I feel like the great artists of our time are.
Yes. Most of them are detectives.
No. Most of them are 50 Cent and Nelly.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is true. She's got a black Cadillac SUV with a very loud radio, and it's tuned only to vintage hip-hop.
Yes. Yeah, those are my my artists. Because I am an old white woman, and that is the important part of this.
It is a good thing, ladies and gentlemen, that Melissa enjoys air conditioning in her car because the windows are rolled up, and I don't have to be subjected to looking at people through the window who will be, I couldn't even imagine the looks.
Yeah. I have to say our UPS driver also has Sirius satellite radio, and he has it tuned to... The Fly, or Backspin. Backspin, I guess, is now something else because of freaking LL Cool J. But The Fly is still good, and he delivered a package, and I walked outside, and I heard it blaring from his car, because those UPS trucks don't have...
they're wide open.
Yeah. And before he got in, I raised my fist in the air and said, "Tupac forever." And he turned on, he's like, "Yeah!" I'm like, see... I'm in solidarity with the UPS.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good thing. So, I don't know that Tupac or 50 or Nelly would give a shit, but I am going to give a shit about the Golden State Killer Part 2. I'm calling this the Central Coast years because it's a bit confusing and layered timeline and geography-wise. I was hoping to do Northern California, Central Coast, and then Southern California. The Central Coast, to me, is just going to have to be Santa Barbara County and Ventura County, because he strikes in Santa Barbara County, then Ventura County, then back to Santa Barbara County. And I know they're neighboring counties, but it's, I'm like one of those horrible people that compartmentalize everything. Hey, how come I'm not a serial killer? But so the only way to get into this is to get into it. And producer Mark is correct. I haven't really slept much in the last 2 weeks because I've been seriously immersed in the online world of Golden State Killer shit. And it's all fascinating. Many Facebook pages, brilliant people. legit retarded people. It's a great mix of a community. I've learned so much. I've read so much. My eyes are spinning. But what I'm going to start with today is a post that I answered someone. I was up late. You could just see me furiously typing like, and then, because this person asked in one of the online Golden State Killer forums, no wonder Joseph James DeAngelo is not talking after being arrested. Can you imagine the shock to his system? And I thought a long time about how to respond other than finding something sharp and figuring out where this person lives and just sticking it into them repeatedly. I thought, no, it's best if you just answer, in the written word. So here's my response to, gosh, it's a shame that the Golden State Killer is being silent and not eating because it's a shock to his system to be arrested after a 42-year reign of terror. So I start with, imagine you're asleep in your castle, the place that you pay for. It probably wasn't given to you. You've worked for it. You might be single. You might be a single mother. You might be alone. You might be with a loved one or two. You might be married. You might be asleep with your spouse. And imagine an anger-filled motherfucker slips into your home and shines a flashlight in your eyes. You reach for something that you may have stealthily hidden to protect yourself after hearing about all of the attacks in your area, and you're prepared for a situation like this. But he has been in your home earlier, maybe days, maybe weeks, even months before. And he has removed any baseball bats or weapons that you thought you had available. And if you keep a gun under your pillow or your mattress, you can reach for it all you want. But he will shine his flashlight on his hand, which is holding the bullets from your gun that he removed earlier. You feel powerless, and you want to live, so you do what he says. He ties your limbs so tightly that some of the victims who are still around because they were allowed to live say that their hands go numb almost immediately, and some of them turn purple. He rapes you. Rapes you. And yet, that's not the worst part of the experience because he's so underendowed and inept. The worst part is the horror of feeling like you're going to die. And some do. But if you live, you're then terrorized for the rest of your life. He'll call you randomly, reminding you of what he did to you and threatening to do it to you again. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your husband. I fucked your sister. Remember me? Remember when we played? We're going to play again. Click. He's like a 12-year-old whose mom is working late, and this is before caller ID so he can dial at will. So when someone says, imagine the shock to his system being arrested and put in jail, tough shit. Imagine the shock to over 50 women's systems after being raped and terrorized. Imagine God knows how many surviving family members living with the pain of losing their family member in such an awful way. So you're going to have to excuse me if I don't care that the old man's system is in shock. Fuck him to death. And that angry post got 70 likes.
Bravo.
I was so incensed.
Wow, that was absolutely perfect.
Well, that's just because you're married to me and you're producer Mark. But
no, it's really perfect.
I just couldn't give any shits about his discomfort or shock at this. I just could not. The only reason I want him to live is to admit anything and then to see something bad happen to him. But he's not talking. He won't give up anything. He won't admit to anything. So I don't care if he dies of starvation in a cell, which of course they will never let happen. They would feed him with a tube. Maybe he'll will himself to die, and then, it'll really be over. But holy fuck shit. So there was a press conference this week, and this is one of the reasons I didn't want to rush to cover this case in the podcast, because things are coming out every day, including 2 new pieces of information that came out today, and I will address those at the end. But on Wednesday, I believe, Joyce Dudley, the Santa Barbara County DA, filed a complaint against Joseph James DeAngelo. Oh, it was Thursday, in Superior Court of California with special circumstances, meaning lying in wait, the rapes, the use of the firearms, the people versus Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. for the murders of Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez in 1981, and Dr. Robert Offerman and Dr. Alexandra Manning in December of 1979. So he has been charged with 4 more murders. So that's a total of 6 now. There's 6 or 7 more that he can be charged with if he is actually charged with the murder of Claude Snelling, which hopefully he will be. I have to say, I've read criminal complaints online, but this is the first one I printed out. I really like DA Joyce Dudley from Santa Barbara. She's craggy-faced and thin, but I feel much more human than Sacramento County Sheriff DA Anne Marie Schubert, who's a robot bitch mistress. Sorry. So Joyce Dudley, it was a very short press conference. She explained the filing for the 4 murders, and when asked by a reporter, have you had a chance to talk to any of the victims? And she said, yes, I have. And they said, what did you talk about? And she said, that I will not answer. That is a privileged conversation. And then the reporter followed up with, and how did you feel? And she said, when I received the official word from Anne Marie Schubert that it was him and they got him on Wednesday, April 25th, the Tuesday afternoon. She said, I got teary-eyed. And as she was saying that at the press conference, she got teary-eyed again. Now, that's my kind of woman. And not just because I cry like a broken fucking sieve all the time, but I think she's human. And I think she's waited a long time, along with everyone else in law enforcement, to get this monster off the street. So it was fascinating watching that. And when she mentioned that the complaint was on the Santa Barbara County website, DA website, I went to the website and printed it out. And it's 4 pages. And you can read a complaint online all you want. And I'm just a very tangible person. And when I printed it out and I held it in my hands, it was weighty. It's 4 pieces of paper, but it was weighty. It was heavy with everything, with emotion and feeling and justice and information. It was a beautiful thing, and I'm really glad I have a copy of the complaint. It just makes me feel, I don't know, like maybe it's really true. Like it's really true that this is happening. So when we left off at the end of episode 1, it was July of 1979, and Joseph James DeAngelo was a police officer in Auburn, California, and he was arrested for shoplifting a hammer and a can of dog repellent from a pay and save. So, Producer Mark, were you a big fan of the pay and saves in Northern California?
I don't remember the pay and saves. I remember the pick and saves.
Right.
They were all over California.
Right.
But I don't remember the pay and save. So.
Now, apparently they closed, pretty quickly. I've heard some people describe it as almost a hardware type store. I don't know if I had a hardware store, I wouldn't name it Pay and Save.
No.
That definitely sounds like a Pick and Save or a Big Lots or something like that.
Well, let me see if I can do a little internet research while you're talking. I'll see if I can find anything out.
You mean you'd actually do a job like a producer?
Hey.
I'm just kidding. You do a beautiful job. So anyway, Pay and Save, 1979. So he is relieved of his duties in August. He's fired. And he files a complaint. He appeals the firing. But when he finds out that he would have to submit to an interview and questioning, he suddenly withdraws the appeal and the lawsuit. So he knows that the jig is up and he's fucking fired and he's a thieving asshole. Now, one might ask, hindsight being 2020, with a spate of rapes and robberies and ransackings going on for now 6 years, from 1973 to 1979, and a cop who they often suspected that the Visalia ransacker and the East Area Rapist and all the other names he was given was somehow involved in law enforcement, had knowledge of law enforcement procedures, was always one step ahead of law enforcement. If a person who is in law enforcement is caught stealing a hammer and dog repellent, do you think you might want to take a closer look?
Oh, come on. Picky.
Yeah, I know. Hindsight is 2020, but holy fucking shit. Now, here's one of those pieces of information that was just released this week by my beloved retired detective, Paul Holes. He said that several of the victims who were allowed to live, 2 different sets of victims actually, said that a man with a flashlight came in, shined it in their eyes, and said, "Freeze." Who says freeze? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just this week, 42 years later, a man comes into your house with a flashlight, shines it in your eyes, and says, "Freeze." I was talking to my friend David today, and it was supposed to be a rhetorical question, but I asked him, who says freeze? And his answer was Charlie's Angels. So I punched him really hard in the throat and said, it was not Farrah Fawcett breaking into people's homes, shining lights in their eyes and raping them.
But she did have a very small penis.
It probably resembled a clitoris, I'm guessing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
By the way, I found out about Pay and Save.
Yes, sir.
Big drugstore chain.
Drugstore.
The drugstore chain. Toward the end, they tried to make it into a like a pick and save, but that was after
the arrest.
After he was fired.
Okay.
And all of that. Yeah. So big in the West. So
okay, well they ain't big no mo. They're not around.
They're not. Nope. They went defunct in 1992.
Oh wow, I would have thought way before then, but so the Golden State Killer, who's not really known as that yet, but that's what I'm going to call him, was fired in August of 1979. Now he's not working, and I guess he decides to take some road trips. So he ends up on Monday, August 1st in Goleta, which is in Santa Barbara County. It's north of the city of Santa Barbara, but still in Santa Barbara County. And this, you never want to compare, like what. Every attack is bad. Every attack is bad, whether you live or die. And he made sure if you lived, it was a bad attack. But this one holds so much interest because he seemed to really be slipping. He had a couple of aborted attempts at rape and robbery in Sacramento County in June, July of 1979. And after he was fired, I guess he kind of laid low. Maybe he thought it was time to take his show on the road. So he ends up in Santa Barbara County, and it's October 1st of 1979, and it's 2 a.m. And this is pretty bizarre. So the victims, who have pseudonyms, Priscilla and Abel, are awakened by a male voice ordering them, wake up, wake up. And he shakes the foot of the bed. So they wake up and a flashlight is in their eyes. And he says, get on your stomachs. Don't move, motherfuckers, or I'll kill you. Do not turn your head. And they obey. Now, the next things he says are typical of what he said in the past. He tried to throw people off thinking he was a drug addict. He would say, I'm just here to rob you. I just want money and drugs. I just want food. I have to feed my band. We live in a tent down by the river. I don't know if it was all the band in his head, or I don't really think he played an instrument. Unless
that's weird. He said the word band?
Band. I have to feed my band.
Okay, that's very strange.
So he says, I've got to have money, which, as we know, it was never, there was lots of money left at these houses that he did horrible things to. Lots of expensive jewelry, and he would typically take costume jewelry. He would take something of more sentimental or emotional value, not financial value. I've got to have money. So he throws shoelaces on the bed and says to Priscilla, tie his hands. Tie it tight or I will kill you. So Priscilla's naked, but she does as she's ordered. And then he says, get on your stomach. He tied her wrists and then he retied the man's wrists. So that's one of his MOs. He would have typically the female tie up the male, knowing that she wouldn't tie it tight so that he could get out. He would then tie the female. They're both incapacitated. Then he would retie the male. So, this ain't a dummy. This ain't a dummy we're talking about. So he tied their ankles, but he tied the woman's ankles more loosely. And he says, where's the money? Don't look at me, you motherfucker. Where's the money? And she says, it's in her purse in the kitchen. So he leans over and he says in a whisper, I'll kill you, motherfuckers. So they hear him rummaging around in other parts of the house. And when he comes back, he's more agitated and angry and threatening. I can't find your purse. One move, motherfucker. He was also known to say, where do you have X? And if someone would answer, he would say, shut up. So I don't know if he has a dual personality, and I don't care, because lots of people probably have a dual personality and don't slaughter people in their beds. So he would ask a question, and then if you would answer it, he would tell you to shut the fuck up. So he didn't even want the answers to the questions, quite frankly. It was all about his ability to control. So he says he couldn't find her purse. They hear him rummaging around. He comes back and says, I can't find it. And she says, it's on the kitchen sink. So he unties her ankles and says, show me. Now she's naked. He pulls her up from the bed and pushes her out of the room and down the hall. And they enter the living room and he tells her to lie down and then he reties her ankles. Turn over is what he says. And from the way that the flashlight is shining, she can see under her blindfold. She can tell he's looking up and down her body with the flashlight. And then she hears him lubricating himself. Now, the good thing about this is that his cock is so small, he has to use a very little bit of lotion. So that's always good.
This is so gross.
He's saving money. He's a money saver. See what happens when you have a tiny penis? Look at all the money you save with a tiny cock. So he walks away, and she hears him in the kitchen, and then she hears him walking down the hall, and then she hears nothing, and he's right over her. She doesn't know how he did it. It was like he floated in the air. And he kneels by her shoulders and he pulls shorts over her head as a second blindfold. And he says, now I'm going to kill you and I'm going to cut your throat. Now he walks back into the kitchen and he's pacing back and forth. And this one, he talks a lot more. So he's pacing back and forth and he's talking to himself. I'm going to kill him. I'll kill him. I'll kill him. I'll kill him. So she hears him walking up and down the hall, muttering some more. She rolls to her side, gets up on her feet, and hops to the front door. She tripped and fell against the wall. She still can't see because she's got a blindfold and then shorts over her head. But she hops to the front door area. She's somehow able to open the door. I guess the things that you can do under the threat of your own life being taken, somehow magical things happened in this case because these people were put through the ringer. When she gets to the door, the ties around her ankles fall off, and she bolts out of the house, tripping and falling, blindfolded and still hands behind her back, screaming. She can't see. She slams into the side of the house. Joseph James DeAngelo, allegedly, approaches her silently, and she only knew that he was there when he grabbed her and pulled her by the arm and scraped her along the ground. And he took a gloved hand and clutched her mouth, and he hissed into her face, "I told you to be quiet." He pressed a knife to her throat. He pulled her to her feet and directed her to the house. He pushed her down on the floor and retied her ankles. Now, having heard her scream, her husband Abel thinks that she's been killed. He is like, "I'm not waiting anymore." He swings his legs off the bed. He hops to the sliding glass door. He gets outside and he hops into the bushes in the dark. And he's trying to throw his body against the fence to break the fence down. But it's too secure and he falls down and he hides in the shadows. So no sooner has he done this when the alleged Golden State Killer's flashlight coasts across the backyard trying to locate him. He can see it, but allegedly Joseph James DeAngelo cannot see him. So he turns and goes back into the house. By then, the neighbor's lights come on, and the man pops up from the bushes, Abel, and screams and yells. So this time, the woman, Priscilla, has been able to get her ankles free again. She hears a vehicle leave, and she thinks it's the assailant. So she goes down the hallway to find her husband. Her blindfold begins to fall off, and she can sort of see, and she tries to put a bathrobe over her shoulders just for modesty, and runs down the hall and out the front door. But her robe fell off, so she's naked again in the front yard, and she runs in front of a passing car screaming for help. At this time, an off-duty FBI agent, who's her neighbor, is in pursuit of a male who was seen darting from the house down the long driveway.
Oh, so that's the car she heard. Was
And it's like a flag lot. So they have the house in the back, and the FBI agent, I believe, rented the house to them, and he lives in the front house. So he sees a man wearing a ski mask. He chases the masked man down the street, and he has, at that point, found a bike that he had stolen and hid for an escape. And the FBI agent chases him down two streets, actually, Kellogg Drive and then San Patricio. And then he loses him. So the masked man on the bike has dumped the bike, jumped over the fence, and run across some school grounds. And they find the 10-speed, 27-inch Nishiki bike and a steak knife. So
that was grueling. God.
Yeah.
I've never heard that told in such detail.
It's,
oh my God.
I mean, to think how close you came and that you escape twice. Two adults escape this person's grasp twice. So the FBI agent gets back to his house. The female victim is lying on the front yard screaming. The sheriffs arrive and wonder what the F is happening. They get up to the long driveway up to the back house, and they find the boyfriend, well, the husband actually, Abel, is still tied up, and he's under an orange tree. So After investigating, they find out that the suspect pried open a rear sliding glass door with a screwdriver kind of tool. The bike that he was on had been stolen, and oddly, it's registered to a U.S. parole officer, and it had been stolen sometime after 7 p.m. that day. Now, the shoe impressions around the victim's house and even in the neighbors' yards, same impressions from where the bike was stolen from the parole officer, same impressions from around windows in Northern California, the Adidas runner with a star-shaped pattern, size 9, and yet no one will connect these because no one wants to talk. Nobody wants to fucking talk. So this is his first attack in what they call Southern California, since he had a botched attack in July in Danville. So I call this the Central Coast, but they call it Southern California. So I'm still going to call it the Central Coast.
Well, that's a correct assessment.
Why, thank you.
That's what it's called.
So that's October of 1979. Now, he's been out of work for a couple months, and again, he's taken his shit on the road. So December 30th of 1979, it's a Sunday. Dr. Robert Offerman, who's 44, and his girlfriend, Dr. Alexandra Manning, who's 39, return home from a house party. Now, Dr. Offerman is an orthopedic surgeon, and Dr. Manning is a clinical psychologist. Now, this is a Sunday. Dr. Manning's divorce had just been granted on Friday the 28th. So she was just now divorced, and she and Dr. Offerman were going to get married as soon as the division of property came through with the divorce. So they live unusually in a condo. That's not typically the Golden State Killer's MO. He prefers a single-family, one-story house. But there was an empty condo next door that was for sale, and he had popped a screen out and was squatting in the empty condo next to them.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. So they go to an open house because some friends of theirs were going to sell the house, and they were having a last big holiday party. Now, this house is on Toltec Way, and that comes into play later because he finds 2 more victims in 1981, also on Toltec Way. So a lot of these houses, a lot of these streets, are parallel to each other, are close to each other, are ways that he can get to and from easily. So he has lots of stuff scoped out. So Dr. Offerman and Dr. Manning get back to their condo around midnight. Sometime between 4 and 8 p.m. before they've arrived home, a prowler has attempted to pry a door open about a block from their house. At between 5:30 and 8:30, a little bit after the first attempt, someone breaks into a home on Hannah Drive and burglarizes it. There's a safe inside the house, and it's forced open. Cash was taken. Expensive jewelry was left behind, but one plain solid wedding band is stolen. That same night at 9:30, a burglary occurs on Queen Anne Lane. The sliding glass door is pried open. $2 bills are stolen, along with some jewelry. Now, one of the jewelry items is a class ring from the 1946 class of the Merchant Marines with the initial HJH. And the husband, the man of the house, had an affiliation with UCSB, the University of California, Santa Barbara, Department of Engineering. A piece of twine, which matches the twine that's later connected to all the murders, is found in the backyard. The mention of the ring comes into play because many detectives and Michelle McNamara, the author of I'll Be Gone in the Dark, spend a lot of time looking through pawn shops, online sales sites for any of the items stolen. There's a list of random shit that he has stolen over the 125 ransackings and the 50 rapes and the 12 murders. He's always stolen a souvenir or 2 or 7, including but not limited to an entire set of china. What? That's one of the biggest questions on the pages asking questions about this case. Did he bike away with china? Did he put it in the little basket in his bike? How did he get away with a set of china? So this ring and another set of cufflinks from another robbery have been looked for so many years. And when he was arrested, I know they took boxes and boxes of things from his home. I'm praying to God some of those are items that would connect him to everything, if not most of it. And I am standing here with my hands rubbing them together, waiting for that information to be released. And I'm sure it will not be released until and if there is a trial, if he makes it to then. So later that night, 10:15, a couple living on Windsor Court. Now this is, other than waking up to flashlight in your eyes, this is the next scariest thing. A couple returns home from the movies, and as they approach their house, they see someone running out their back living room door. They enter the residence, and they hear him jumping over the fence, and he lands in the yard of a school. Nothing is taken from their house, but their dog has been beaten to death. Their poodle. Beaten to death. There's shoe prints found in the backyard. They can describe him as wearing a dark jacket and a fisherman's type hat. And the shoe prints in the backyard are, guess what? Size 9. Adidas runner. Yes. So here we go. December 30th, 1979, 12 a.m., a neighbor hears Dr. Offerman's Porsche pull into the common parking lot of the condo. She hears some voices, assuming it's Dr. Offerman and Dr. Manning. They go into their home and go to bed. At 3:05, December 30th, a neighbor hears what he thinks is a gunshot. And then he hears 3 more gunshots, and then a pause, and then a final gunshot. Several neighbors hear the gunshots, and this particular neighbor and his wife go upstairs to get a better view so they can see where the shots are coming from. They look around and they don't notice anything, but the lights are off at the Offerman's house. But they do notice that the sliding glass door is open, but the screen is closed. So at 3:15, the same couple, trying to find the source of the gunshots, look out a different window, and they see a small white boxy car, described as either a Pinto or a Honda, with no lights, driving out of the common parking lot. These are the only witnesses to this because even though all the neighbors heard the gunshots, they're the only ones that got up to investigate, and nobody called the sheriff's department.
That really is something.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Dr. Manning is found nude, laying face down on the bed with her hands tied behind her back, and there is a bullet wound to the back of her head. Dr. Offerman was kneeling with his head on the ground and his backside in the air. Sheets and pillows were partially underneath him. He had 1 bullet wound to his upper chest and 3 in his back. And there's white twine, the same type of trilobal twine around his left wrist only. So the bindings that were used were 1/16 diameter 3-strand strings of white nylon twine. And these were found in lots of places. There's, the complicated diamond knot pieces of twine are found in many parts of the house, and they match the nylon twine used in the October 1st attack that was thwarted, even though some people call them shoelaces. He's now graduated to twine. So there's no sign of ransacking the house. There's some evidence that some of the drawers have been gone through and some of the closets. The lights were turned off. The thermostat was turned off. There's a plastic bag containing turkey bones and a turkey carcass found on the back patio and some scraps of turkey near the door. There's a turkey bone inside the residence close to the door. There are 3 sliding glass doors in the residence, and all of them had pry marks. The one leading into the living room had been pried so hard that the door jamb had actually come loose from the wall.
So wait a minute, he ate a turkey while he was there?
Well, we know he likes to eat at his victims' homes. There's two schools of thought, that he ate the turkey or that he was using the turkey to subdue a dog or any dog he may have found.
Ah, I see.
The Offermans didn't have a dog, but it's kind of odd. A man was seen walking a German Shepherd behind their house. A man that no one in the neighborhood knew. The tennis shoe impressions in the back of the house were the star-shaped design Adidas runner. They were also found along with dog paw prints. There's theories that he brought a dog to the scene.
Well, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the dog showed up when he smelled turkey. I don't know.
Wow.
So Alexandra Manning, when he came into the room, it's surmised that when he said, "I'm just here to rob you," or whatever he said, stuffed her jewelry, which was probably on the nightstand next to her, between the mattress and the bed frame, because they found her expensive jewelry there. So Dr. Manning had not been sexually assaulted. And there was some blue-green flakes of paint found on her big toe, as well as some loose hairs on her back. I don't know if those were collected and saved correctly, but we can hope so. This time the killer used a .38 caliber revolver, probably a Smith & Wesson, loaded with Supervel brand .38 caliber ammunition with 110 grain jacketed bullets. Now, jacketed bullets, I don't know a lot about ballistics. I would think sounds like something law enforcement would use. What do you think?
Yep.
That's just sort of what I thought. And I literally know, I know shit. I know nothing about ballistics. I know literally nothing about anything. I shot one gun one time, a rifle. My grandfather, I think, always wanted a boy, and my mom was a girl because that's how she could have babies. And I'm a girl, and he didn't get his boy. So he took me to a turkey shoot one year when I was 11 or 12. Now, I didn't want to go because I thought they actually shot turkeys. What they do is they shoot a clay disc, and then whoever has the best, shots gets a frozen turkey that you get to take home to your family for Thanksgiving. So I held one rifle one time. My grandfather showed me how to use it, and it kicked me back so hard my shoulder hurt until I was probably 47. So I don't really care much about guns, don't know a lot about them. Fascinated by the type of guns people use for whatever job. But yeah, jacketed bullets, that sounds like a pretty big giveaway. So the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department will never, I shouldn't say never, because they're playing ball now, but they wouldn't even answer calls from the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department saying, "Can we please get information about this homicide and the attack in October that was aborted?" They wouldn't even admit that it had happened. Would not admit.
What? Wait. They wouldn't admit that it happened.
Wouldn't admit it happened. We have nothing like that. We don't have anything like that.
Well, how did we know about it now?
Well, eventually, I guess somebody fucking opened their ass crack. But Sacramento was like, look, we've got this guy. He did XYZ. Sounds familiar, don't you think? Twine, flashlight. They have 2 surviving victims. And at this point, only 2 deceased victims. Nope. We don't know what you're talking about. That's not this. It's a botched robbery. That's exactly what they said.
Boy, some of this stuff just boils my blood.
Mm-hmm. So even though I would love to stay in Santa Barbara County, we're going to now move. He's moved a little further south. March 13th of 1980, he moves on to Ventura County. Now, never fear, he goes back to Santa Barbara County, but he's moved down to Ventura County. So the coroner is confused when he finds this couple. He's like, there's no struggle. They're peacefully under their covers. Were they tied up after death? I can't imagine that they were even bound. The killer took a log from a pile of firewood outside their bedroom on the patio to use for fires in the winter. And he stood over them and bludgeoned them to death. So he's changed his MO.
Yeah, no gunshots that neighbors will hear.
Nope. So he kills Lyman Smith with 1 hit to the head. And apparently every crime scene, he's much more angry and brutal to the women. Unless the men fight back, and then he'll try and put a world of hurt on you, but he's just much more brutal. He will just basically incapacitate the man with a shot or a blunt force head trauma, but he'll beat the women until they're unrecognizable. So he bludgeons Lyman Smith's wife, Charlene, just over and over and over again until she's unrecognizable. So Ronald Kornblum is the coroner. And this is kind of, I don't want to call it junk science, but it's kind of been proven that everyone's body is different. But he was so confused by the scene. Like, who comes in, ties people up, and then bludgeons them? And there's no fight. I don't understand. So he even checked their adrenal glands during an autopsy, and their adrenal glands are normal. So a theory in 1980 was that if you were under extreme stress before you die, your adrenal glands pour out cortisol and hormones, and they shrink. But it's kind of been thought now that, adrenal glands vary in size from person to person, so it's hard to say. So he was wondering, did someone just walk in and bludgeon them when they were asleep and then tie them up afterward? So Charlene's hands are tied with this elaborate diamond knot. Sailors call it a lanyard. Landlubbers call it a Chinese decorator knot. And Charlene happened to be an interior decorator. So, of course, instead of, who did this and why, it's like, well, maybe there's symbolism here. She was a decorator and somebody tied just her wrists, not her ankles, but her wrists in the diamond knot. They likened it to saying it was a sign, a symbol, like if you find a stripper that's choked to death with her own G-string.
Oh, please.
I know. I mean, I really do have a huge amount of respect for law enforcement, but some of this stuff is just wow-wee. So Lyman and Charlene Smith are kind of an odd couple. Lyman's 43, Charlene's 33, and this is her third marriage. She had dumped 2 husbands by the time she's 28. And Lyman had kind of gone up and down the money scale. And someone described Charlene as like a low-rent gold digger. That's sort of a sad thing. But it didn't Lyman was an intelligent guy, he came from Pocatello, Idaho, moved to Sacramento as a young person with his family, scraped hard, worked his way through, law school. He's a really well-known attorney in Santa Paula, and he's now being considered for an appointment to the Superior Court as a judge. And I think that's why Charlene came back, because she had left him when he had kind of a bad business deal. He started a weird company with an old friend called Maverick International Airlines, and they shipped pregnant cows to the Shah of Iran. What? So it's, strange business dealings. It brings him into contact with a lot of unsavory characters, to put it mildly. And if he's going to be appointed to be a judge, he might make enemies, left and right. So because they felt there was no struggle, law enforcement thought that, this killer knew them. This was a revenge killing of some sort. Added to that, Charlene was a bit of a rounder and had started dating right after they got married. Okay. Including but not limited to a Ventura County sheriff's deputy. Now, he didn't know that she was married, and he apparently found her. He was, madly in love with her. When he found out she was married, he shows up at the house with a letter, like a sternly written letter. And he was under suspicion for a while as having killed them, but he was on duty and had been on a call, so he was cleared. But he shows up at the house with a letter. Charlene's not there. I think it was probably just telling her how much she'd hurt him and calling it off. But Lyman's there. And Lyman's like, "Who are you? What do you want?" And he's like, "It's a letter for Charlene." He intercepts the letter, and the sheriff's deputy says, Are you really her husband? And he opens the door and shows the deputy pictures and things around the house to prove that he is who he is. I love that the man who's married to the woman fucking around has to prove to the sheriff's deputy, "Yes, I'm her husband and you're fucking her. Stop it."
Yeah. Okay.
Stop it.
This is...
Stop fucking my wife. So there, I understand it's an odd MO. It would seem that there's a whole shitload of suspects. In fact, when it was, brought out that they'd been murdered, neighbors thought they killed each other. The neighbors, I guess, knew that the marriage was on the rocks. They had loud arguments, and it was like, was it like murder-suicide, or it was like a duel? They dueled it out, So Lyman had been married once before, his high school sweetheart, and then he, falls in love with this young, mid-priced gold digger. And his son Gary, who he insisted, has to earn his allowance, shows up to mow the lawn. And he's 12, and the door that Charlene leaves open for the gardeners is locked. So he goes in the front door, he finds that open, and he goes down the hall and he looks in the master bedroom. And there's, 2 bodies under covers. And he's like, and he's 12. And he knows that his dad and his stepmom are having trouble. And he's like, oh no, what if I pull the covers back and it's Dad and it's not Charlene? What if it's another woman? So he goes and he pulls the covers back, and his father is laying on his stomach. And even though it's dark in the room, he can see that his head is completely bashed in. So he stumbles out of the room. There's a new system called Emergency 911. And he calls that number, and the police show up and they find Gary sitting out on the porch. The detective notices that the sofa has been rifled through. He sees that, oddly, the mattress in the spare bedroom is askew, like someone had been jumping up and down on the bed. And then in the master bedroom, he pulls back the sheets. Lyman is naked, laying on his stomach, his wrists and ankles bound with a drapery cord. Charlene's lying on her back next to him, wearing only a t-shirt, but that's pulled over her head and she's been hit in the head. And it's a log from right outside, and it's bloody, and it's laying between them at the foot of the bed. There's actually a picture of this online, and I did not know what was on the bedspread between them at the foot of the bed, but now I do. I was like, what is that, a cylinder-shaped thing? Is it a candle? No, it's the log that was used to bludgeon them to death. The detectives actually take the wall above them in the bed as evidence. They take the wooden headboard as evidence. So it's now, clear that the Golden State Killer is a premeditated night stalker. He's now a premeditated murderer. The DNA, Charlene had been raped. The DNA links that case to another murder later, but also the rapes in Sacramento and Contra Costa County. And that's when he changed his MO to bludgeoning. So now he goes back north Sunday, July 26th of 1981. Again, another real estate connection. There's a real estate agent showing a house that Sherry Domingo and her boyfriend Gregory Sanchez were staying in. It belonged to Sherry Domingo's aunt, and she was staying in it until it sold. So a real estate agent shows the house to a prospective buyer, and there's a second buyer that arrives, a man by himself, and the agent was not expecting him, and she said, okay, just go ahead and look around. Well, he does, but he goes outside and removes a screen to the bathroom window.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. That's at sometime in the afternoon on Sunday, July 26th. At 9:45, Sunday, July 26th, a neighbor says he sees a man standing behind a large tree near the property. At 10 p.m., a man says that he and his wife are walking their dog in the neighborhood, and there's a man following them. And at one point, he's like 6 to 10 feet behind them. So they speed up. They say he's young, 5'10", blonde, hair to his neck. At 11 p.m., a mother and daughter are jogging in the area, and they see a white male standing on the sidewalk that runs behind we'll call it the Domingo residence. The man is in his 20s, 5'10", and he's got a German Shepherd with him. So this is a year and a half after the Offerman Manning murders, where there was a man seen with a German Shepherd behind their condo and dog prints near the tennis shoe prints outside the sliding glass door. So I don't know if he had like when you're a kid and you get those things in the back of a comic book, sea monkeys, where you just add water. Maybe he just has like a German Shepherd that every now and then, if you just add water, the dog gets big and appears. I
wonder if it's going to ever come out. Maybe he owned a German Shepherd at the time.
Believe me, that's another question that is... I'll tell you the even deeper conspiracy. This is the deep shit. Reports are that it was an albino white German Shepherd, and one paw only had 3 toes. So that's a pretty distinctive dog. If he owned an albino German Shepherd with 3 toes, I don't really know. It was white German Shepherd hair found at some of the crime scenes and paw prints with 3 toes.
Okay.
I know.
This gets more and more interesting.
It's very fascinating. So on Monday, July 27th, 1981, sometime between 3:20 and 3:45, a neighbor says they heard a gunshot, and then they heard a scream, and then they heard some dogs barking, and for about a half an hour, and no one calls the sheriff's department.
For a half an hour, and nobody calls the sheriff's department.
Mm-hmm. Other neighbors also heard the gunshot, and no one reports it. So a real estate agent has some prospective buyers for the house that's for sale that Sherry and Greg are staying in until Sherry's aunt sells the house. The real estate agent arrives to show the house. He peers in the bedroom and sees Gregory Sanchez laying partially inside the closet and Sherry lying on the bed. Now, the couple have a 3-year-old son with them, and he rushes past them and looks in the room, and he is so shocked by what he sees, he doesn't speak for a year.
Oh, dear.
A year.
That's horrible.
He's shocked into stasis and doesn't speak for a year because of what he's seen at the age of 3. So the next time you wonder if Joseph James DeAngelo is uncomfortable or in shock, fuck him to death because he fucking scared a little boy into not speaking for a year. Just one of the ticks on his side of the chalkboard of the horror he has wrought. So this attack becomes important in that it changes the way he moves and doesn't move, potentially. So Sherry Domingo has bruises on her wrists and ankles. Greg Sanchez has no bruises. Now, Greg Sanchez is young, tall, like 6'3", in shape, well-built, strong. So there's only one piece of twine, and it's found on the floor near the bed. There's some identified fibers scattered over Sherry's body. Greg Sanchez is nude, laying face down on the floor, partially in the closet, partially out. He has one gunshot wound to his cheek. Now, that wound has not been fatal, and they feel that what happened was Greg comes after the Golden State Killer, and that's when things go south. So he has one gunshot wound to the cheek. He has 24 blunt force wounds to his head because he challenged the Golden State Killer, who does not like it when things don't go his way. The killer has removed clothing from the closet and placed it over Greg Sanchez's head. And he has never been bound. So he probably came after him. He got the one gunshot is the shot to the cheek that's not fatal. And potentially the Golden State Killer realizes, I can't keep shooting because it's too loud. So he beats him to death in the head. Sherry Domingo is nude, covered by all the bedding. She's face down and both arms are behind her back. So the ligature marks on her wrists and ankles indicate she's been bound, and she's literally hog-tied. Her ankles are up over her buttocks and tied to her wrist. She's been killed with a single blow to the head, and it's the same weapon that was used to kill Gregory Sanchez. So Greg Sanchez was shot in a kneeling position, so he fell to the floor and then was struck in the head. He got up and was struck again by the killer, and then he stumbles to the closet and dies. Both victims they end up dying from the blunt force head trauma, and the weapon is not found, so he probably took it with him. The deputies responding find no evidence of forced entry, although the screen from the small window in the master bathroom has been removed and thrown a few feet away. So the window's not big enough to gain entry by a human, but they find that they could reach in and unlock the door, and that access from the bathroom is outside and then goes to the master bedroom. So that's more than likely how he got in, what he did, how he did it. So this just came out today in BuzzFeed, which is, the most knowledgeable of literary sources.
Well, but it does get pretty good scoops.
They definitely are scoopy. They're scooping right now. So this is an interview with Joseph James DeAngelo's nephew, the son of his sister. And he says, Uncle Joe may have lost his, well, he says, I was going to say lost his shit, but he says maybe this is the start of Uncle Joe going wacko. What he says is a family buried secret that when the kids were young and their father was in the Air Force and moved the family to Germany for a short period of time, Joe and his sister Constance were playing in an empty warehouse. 2 airmen walked in and raped Constance. She was 7 and Joe was 9. And this is Jesse Ryland, who is Constance's son. And he says, he's 35 now. And he's like, that's a really crazy time for a kid. And then to see his sister be violated. Yeah, that's a horrible thing. But I bet you a lot of people have seen a lot of shocking and traumatic things. And they don't grow up to rape and murder when you see a lot of shocking things.
Yeah, but now that I've heard that, you know that his defense is going to use that sort of thing.
Of course they are. Of course. They're going to use that and the fact that he had a tiny penis and that he felt inadequate and that his mom was a bitch and blah, blah, blah. Oh, and Bonnie, his girlfriend that he was engaged to, his fiance he was engaged to, who broke up with him. It's Bonnie's fault. It's no one's fault.
She broke his heart.
I wish she'd broken all of him and into little pieces and threw him into the bay, and then none of this would have happened. But it ain't her fault. It's his. So some of the surviving victims reported that he said, I hate you, Mommy. Mommy hates it when I do this. I'm sorry, Mommy. But it then became more widely known as more victims appear and are questioned. He said, I hate you, Bonnie. Fuck you, Bonnie. Bonnie hates it when I do this. I'm sorry, Bonnie. So it's Bonnie, not Mommy. And quite frankly, I don't care what name he uses or what female, pejorative he decides. It's no one's fault but his. So as of today, these updates are going to keep coming. The Santa Barbara County District Attorney Joyce Dudley, Orange County District Attorney Tony Rackauckus, Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, and Ventura County District Attorney Greg Totten met in Santa Barbara today at the District Attorney's office with members of their staff and representatives of various law enforcement up and down California to discuss the next steps in the prosecution of Joseph James DeAngelo. It says, important issues were discussed, but no decisions were made regarding the case, where it's going to be tried, composition of a trial team. All the agencies are united to resolve and ensure that DeAngelo gets accountable for all the crimes all across California. And the district attorneys are scheduled to meet later in June to discuss further details, and their staff will continue to prepare for the case.
Right, so they're going to try to find the best of all the cases to convict him on.
I'm sure you're right. What they have the most DNA, the most evidence on. I can't help but think it'll be in Southern California, but hey, what do I know? I guess I just don't want to look at Anne Marie Schubert's face anymore.
Okay, that's all right.
Sorry, I have a great amount of respect. I was never a fan of Tony Rackauckus, but I have a great amount of respect for him because what he said at the original press conference when Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested, he said he has been known by many names: the East Area Rapist, the East Side Rapist, the original Night Stalker, and the Golden State Killer. But today we are proud to call him Defendant. And that is the Golden State Killers Central Coast Rampage. Part 3 will be the Southern California, much further south, Southern California part of his horror, and more cowbell.
And remember, we'll take any tips on this case or any other case if you give us a phone call at 832-TIPSTER, that's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.